Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer in for Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Debris from the Titanic tour submarine found on the seafloor. The U.S. Coast Guard says there was a catastrophic implosion and all 5 on board are presumed dead. A devastating tornado touches down in a Texas town, killing at least 4 people. The southern United States has been bracing for severe storms in recent days. President Biden defending his decision to call China's Xi Jinping a dictator. This as Biden and the Indian Prime Minister vow to bolster ties. A House committee today voted to release IRS whistleblower testimony that seems to show government bias towards the president's son. And the Supreme Court dashes the hopes of the Navajo Nation for a way to get more water. The decision blocks the tribe's access to the Colorado River. A major breakthrough in the search for the missing Titanic tour submarine. The U.S. Coast Guard found a debris field of the vessel earlier today. Tragically, all crew on board are presumed dead.
The U.S. Coast Guard announced Thursday they found a debris field near the wreckage of the Titanic. Experts determined that the debris is consistent with the Titan submersible that went missing on Sunday.
This morning, an ROV, or remote operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tail cone of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor.
The Coast Guard says they believe the vessel experienced a catastrophic implosion, and they are still working out the exact timeline of what happened to it. Officials noted their listening devices didn't detect any explosive event in the water throughout the search. The noises they did detect were unrelated.
But there doesn't appear to be any connection between the noises and the location on the seafloor. Again, this was a catastrophic implosion of the vessel, which would have generated a significant broadband sound down there that the sonar buoys would have picked up.
The Coast Guard notified the families of the 5 passengers on board and offered their condolences. It's unclear if or when their bodies can be recovered.
This is an incredibly unforgiving environment down there on the seafloor, and the debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel. And so we'll continue to work and continue to search the area down there, but I don't have an answer for prospects at this time.
In a statement Thursday, OceanGate, which is the company behind the submersible, said they believe the 5 passengers have, quote, sadly been lost. They are OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush, Shahzada Dawood, and his son Suleiman Dawood, Hamish Harding, and Paul-Henri Narjolet. In the next 24 hours, authorities will begin to demobilize the medical personnel and vessels involved in the search. But remote operations will continue on the sea floor. The U.S. Coast Guard will release future updates on their Twitter page. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
At least 4 people were killed overnight when storms brought a devastating tornado to a northwestern Texas town. Search and rescue efforts continue.
My team is currently in close coordination with local authorities, assisting with disaster relief and searching for those who may be injured or trapped by debris as that continues, and we're praying for the Matador community following this.
The tornado struck Matador, a town of a few hundred people, roughly 280 miles northwest of Dallas on Wednesday evening. At least 4 people were killed, 10 others were injured, and dozens of buildings were devastated. All residents have been accounted for. Governor Greg Abbott issued a disaster declaration and deployed state emergency resources to help Matador and the surrounding communities. The twister came as powerful storms pummeled parts of the western and central U.S. People in Texas and Oklahoma are also battling extreme temperatures this week, above 100 degrees in some areas. This is while some 500,000 homes and businesses are without power following devastating storms. The White House rolling out the red carpet for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What the two leaders say as tensions with China continue to mount. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
Welcoming Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the White House on Thursday, President Biden vows to bolster ties with the world's biggest democracy.
It's a democracy, a partnership that is among the most consequential in the world, that is stronger, closer, and more dynamic than any time in history.
The high-profile state visit comes with a grand welcome ceremony, a state dinner tonight,
it is an exceptional privilege,
and a rare joint address to Congress. It also comes as U.S. and India announce a flurry of deals on defense and technology, including a purchase by India of U.S. spy drones that could help India detect and counter moves by the Chinese military.
This will give our defense cooperation a new character in the times to come.
U.S. officials say that Washington wants India to be a strategic counterweight to China in the Indo-Pacific region. And the Biden-Modi meeting comes on the heels of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to Beijing, and just days after President Biden called China's Xi Jinping a dictator. Today, when asked if his comments could complicate his administration's efforts to try to ease tensions with Beijing, and President Biden said no.
The idea of my choosing and avoiding saying what I think is the facts with regard to the relationship with India, with China, is just not something I'm going to change very much.
And President Biden asked that what makes U.S. relation with India different from that with China is the fact that India is a democracy. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
To delve deeper into the international implications here, we spoke with Alex Gray, a senior fellow at American Foreign Policy Council. He's also the former chief of staff for the White House National Security Council. Alex Gray, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany.
So, Alex, India isn't a U.S. ally, but it's being treated like an ally. There's a state dinner for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What is so special about India to get this type of treatment?
Well, India really has the possibility of being the deciding U.S. partner in the Indo-Pacific. They just overtook China in the size of their population. Obviously, the world's largest democracy. Their economy is growing rapidly, and their military capabilities are expanding at a pretty fast clip. And they, under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, they have come to understand in a way that few countries have the clear and present danger posed by the Chinese Communist Party. You take all that and you put it together, and they really they have the possibility of being the pivot point in turning the Indo-Pacific in a direction much more amenable to U.S. interests in a free and open region.
And it seems in terms of the economy and manufacturing, Elon Musk actually just met with Modi yesterday. He was also recently in China. How do you see the U.S. and India working together, either in terms of manufacturing or supply chains, moving that away from China?
India is a tremendous opportunity for U.S. companies and European companies as well to be the alternative to China. Chinese manufacturing, Chinese supply chains, as we've seen, are a huge vulnerability for the West. And India, with its young population, with its energetic population, with its growing middle class, really can be a place, not just as an export market, but potentially as a place for a manufacturing hub and a location where our supply chains can reset, as we in the West collectively have learned since COVID-19, just how vulnerable we are to the CCP's depredations. So I think it's incumbent on the US and on Europe to find ways to work with Prime Minister Modi to build up that Indian capacity to be a manufacturing alternative to China for all of our interests.
And Alex, in terms of geopolitics, India is a member of the Quad Alliance, but is also quite close with Russia, kind of relying on Russia for weapons in terms of China. And it's been criticized by the West because India hasn't criticized Russia in terms of the Ukraine war. So given all these different factors, how should the U.S. approach foreign policy with India?
Well, we need to understand India's historic position and its historic strategic position. India was a leader of the non-aligned movement during the Cold War. India comes to the U.S. Allied bloc, to our Quad Alliance, from a very unique perspective. And I think, strategically, we need to be very patient with India as they attempt to become more comfortable working closely with the United States and with Australia, Japan, and our other partners. I mean, Tiffany, we have to remember, India has only in the last several years realized at the highest levels and in a really visceral sense just what a threat the CCP poses to India. And this, as you know, this was really highlighted by the horrible attack on the border in 2020 when 20 Indian soldiers were brutally murdered by the Chinese. And this has really started a strategic revolution in Delhi. And look, it's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to change 70 years of Indian strategic policy in a couple of years. It's going to take persistence and patient statecraft. And I hope sincerely that we don't, in our exuberance to get India closer to the United States, we don't do and say things that are counterproductive, whether it's about Russia, whether it's about some of the traditional reliance that India has had on Russia for its arms and for its military equipment. I think we need to take the position that this is a long-term strategic realignment, and we need to be focused and we need to be patient as India adapts to its new circumstances.
Alex Gray, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Tiffany.
Despite a lack of support from House GOP leadership, Colorado Congressman Lauren Boebert pushed a resolution to impeach President Biden. Republicans then voted to send the articles of impeachment to the Homeland Security Committee for future consideration. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more from Capitol Hill.
So this House vote ultimately turned into one that gave hesitant Republicans a way out of a tough vote. It was originally launched by Congressman Lauren Boebert as a privileged motion, which would have forced the House to directly vote on whether or not to impeach President Biden. However, leadership was unhappy with this, saying that it would undermine current investigations into the Biden family's business dealings and Biden's border policies. Here's what House Speaker Kevin McCarthy had to say before convincing Lauren Boebert to make this a less consequential vote.
It would discredit if the American public sits back and looks at you just move something onto the floor as serious as impeachment for 2 days, never going through a committee, never showing to the American public the case.
He later convinced Boebert to turn her resolution into a rule, which simply sends this articles of impeachment to the Homeland Security Committee for further consideration on whether or not Biden's border policies warrant impeachment. Some Democrats accuse Republicans of trying to deflect from Trump's legal issues.
That while you want to distract and deflect from all of Donald Trump's legal problems, and they continue to mount, I think there'll be probably more charges we expect in the coming weeks and the coming months.
And for her part, Congresswoman Boebert argued on the House floor that President Biden has essentially eroded the separation of powers with his current border policies. Take a look.
By nullifying our immigration and border security laws through a systematic lack of enforcement, President Biden has not only threatened the lives of countless Americans with its fentanyl crisis and increased crime.
Later, we heard from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been pushing articles of impeachment of her own. She tells me that this initiative was actually started and initiated by her.
I introduced articles impeaching Joe Biden on the border issue first, and then asked her to co-sponsor them. And then she copied my articles and wrote her own, and then introduced them and did a privilege resolution.
Now, Greene says she plans to file these articles of impeachment as privilege motions so that she can push these impeachment proceedings as she sees fit. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
In a party line vote this morning, the House Ways and Means Committee voted to release transcripts of IRS whistleblower testimony. The testimony alleges that the government gave the president's son, Hunter Biden, preferential treatment. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards explains the details.
Following a closed-door hearing this morning, members of the House Ways and Means Committee entered a party line 25-18 vote to release transcripts of IRS whistleblower testimony. Every Democrat on the committee voted against the release. In a press conference after the vote, Chairman Jason Smith said this.
I can now confirm that we have credible whistleblower testimony alleging misconduct and government abuse that is resulting in preferential treatment for the president's son, Hunter Biden.
On Monday, the DOJ announced that Hunter Biden had agreed to plead guilty to 2 federal tax offenses and that he would be placed on probation. Republican lawmakers said it was a slap on the wrist. Smith said there were 3 areas of focus in interviews with whistleblowers.
Number 1, the federal government is not treating taxpayers equally when enforcing tax laws. Number 2, whistleblowers claim the Biden Department of Justice is intervening and overstepping when it comes to the investigation of the president's son. And number 3, these whistleblowers report they have faced almost immediate retaliation.
He explained Hunter's tax crimes.
These tax crimes cover an estimated $2.2 million in unreported tax on global income streams to Mr. Biden and his associates from Ukraine, Romania, and China, totaling $17.3 million from 2014 to 2019. Mr. Biden personally received $8.3 million. Whistleblowers detail foreign payments to Mr. Biden, including $664,000 from the Chinese company State Energy HK, a large diamond worth $80,000, and a Porsche worth $142,000.
Smith said there are other people they need to talk to, but they will continue to follow the facts. Tiffany?
The Supreme Court today ruled against the Navajo Nation's fight for more running water. The majority ruled that a treaty from the 1800s didn't require the federal government to ensure the tribe had an adequate water supply. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards has more.
For years, the Navajo Nation has pursued a lawsuit against the United States. It claimed that the U.S. breached its trust responsibilities to ensure the tribe had access to water on its reservation lands. But the federal government and western states opposed the nation's suit. At oral arguments in March, the U.S. argued that an 1868 treaty did give the tribe rights to more than just land. It included timber, minerals below the surface, and a right to water for the reservation. But
the 1868 treaty didn't impose on the United States a duty to construct pipelines, pumps, or wells to deliver water. Those affirmative duties aren't part of the treaty.
Justice Sonia Sotomayor questioned the merits of the treaty.
That's quite an odd agreement the tribe entered into, isn't it? They agreed to go back to a piece of their homeland and gave the United States control over the vast majority of it. They agreed to sit to a land that would permit them to return to agriculture.
Similarly, the tribe's attorney argued,
in the 1868 treaty, the United States promised the Navajos a permanent homeland. Both parties understood that in promising the Navajos their land, the United States was also promising them the water it needed to sustain life in the arid Southwest.
But the Supreme Court on Thursday agreed with the U.S. In a 5-4 majority decision, the court ruled that although the 1868 treaty reserved necessary water for the nation to accomplish its purposes, it did not require the U.S. to take affirmative steps to secure water for the tribe. Justice Neil Gorsuch said in a dissenting opinion that the majority misread the Navajos' request. He said that the tribe was not arguing that the U.S. has to pay for infrastructure to access the water. They were only asking the government to formulate a plan to identify the water rights it holds for the tribe. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Donald Trump's former attorney John Eastman is speaking out now in his second day of hearings. The State Bar Court of California is accusing him on multiple charges. NTD's Christina Corona had an opportunity to talk with Eastman following yesterday's court case.
Mr. Eastman, for our viewers who don't know exactly what's going on with your case, what is the California State Bar accusing you of?
Well, they're accusing me of not upholding my oath to support the Constitution of the United States, which is, I think, rather interesting, since all of my efforts have been to make sure that unconstitutional conduct in the election did not affect the outcome of the election. They also claim I made a bunch of false statements because I insisted that there was election illegality, and I did that in articles. I did it on Steve Bannon's show, and I did it in briefs filed in a couple of court actions.
Do you feel as though the State Bar is setting a precedent by trying to suspend your license or disbar you?
Well, I think it's a very dangerous precedent. I've said that before. My attorney has said that. Even some folks left of center who are by no means Trump supporters are starting to realize the danger here. I think it's captured well by the head of the 65 Project, which is an organization that is trying to disbar any attorney that worked on any of the Trump election litigation. So right-wing legal talent will never take on election challenges again. That means that if there is fraud and illegality in the conduct of elections, people will be afraid to step up to challenge it for fear that they would have to go through what I've been going through.
And with regard to the charges brought against you, in your estimation, have you done anything wrong?
No, not at all. And all I asked Vice President Pence to do was accede to requests from state legislators to send it back to them, give a brief pause so that they can investigate whether the illegality was significant enough that affected the outcome. And if it didn't, I have in the memo, if it didn't, then Biden is recertified and Biden wins.
Do you really think the State Bar has a case, or is this some kind of political agenda?
Well, I don't think they have a case. They did a 38-page, 85-paragraph, 11-count complaint against me. We responded fulsomely. My response is 112 pages.
You provided counsel to President Trump in 2020 to assist him furthering his cause. Does he have your back today?
No, we haven't spoken much at all since 2021, but not because of any controversy or anything. Just it's prudent to kind of keep a little bit arm's length.
If this hearing doesn't pan out in your favor, what's next? The California State Bar decision it would go to a higher court, I'm assuming.
And then if that doesn't go well, I have the right to appeal to the California Supreme Court.
And finally, what do you want the viewers to know about you and your case? Are there any final thoughts that you would like to share with us?
My whole life has been devoted to the Constitution, and when we're deciding an election by unconstitutional conduct, I thought something needed to be done about it, and I stood up to do that.
Yes, I'm Christina Corona, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this interview with us this evening.
Christina, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up, men, women, and children continue to be trafficked in almost every country in the world. Lawmakers take a closer look at the efforts to fight forced labor. And the fentanyl crisis continues to grow. In California's South Bay area, officials say fentanyl-related deaths have more than doubled in recent months. We'll bring you the details after the break.
Anyone who's ever sold a home will tell you it's really hard. And it's one of the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make. That's why who you work with matters. Together with HomeLight, we take care of every detail.
Did you know ESG is impacting every part of your life? From rising gas prices to global food shortages to out-of-control inflation, even losing your freedom of speech and being censored on the internet. It's all being driven by ESG ideology. Who's in control? What can you do about it? Find out in The Shadow State, the first documentary exposing ESG. The ESG movement of governments and corporations operates in the shadows. Only the light of truth can expose it. Watch The Shadow State documentary, streaming now.
you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tired of scrolling Netflix? Trying to find something that's worth watching? Want to skip the censorship in mainstream media? Well, now you can with Epic TV. New exclusive content every day with over 100 never-before-seen movies, films, and documentaries. Available and streaming now at your fingertips. For a limited time now, you can get 60% off Epic TV by subscribing or upgrading to a yearly plan. Plus, get an additional $10 credit to rent featured movies on Epic Cinema today. Skip mainstream narratives and find quality family entertainment from the comfort of your very own home. Say no to big tech and subscribe to Epic TV.
Welcome back. We now turn our attention to human trafficking. Men, women, and children continue to be trafficked in almost every country around the world. Lawmakers are examining the efforts to fight this heinous crime. NTD's Jason Perry reports.
They are posting job opportunities on Facebook and other social media places that appear to be legitimate.
Cindy Dyer is the ambassador at large to monitor and combat human trafficking. In a hearing on Thursday held by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, she explained how Chinese criminal gangs trick people into becoming a victim of human trafficking.
Individuals think they're going for a legitimate IT job that is going to utilize their skills, linguistic skills, IT skills. When they get there, they are literally locked in a room and they are not allowed to leave. And they are given a quota of how much money they have to get from scam operations.
The victims have been held in places in Cambodia, Burma, and even in the Philippines. Dyer added that if they don't make that quota, they are tortured and deprived of food and water. She also brought up the Department of State's recently released report on human trafficking, and specifically the Chinese Communist Party's forced labor of Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minorities.
We are aggressively working on implementing, thanks to Congress, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. We are adding entities to this list so that we can make sure that Americans are not unwittingly using goods and products that were made by individuals held in slavery in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region.
Another country highlighted at the hearing was Cuba and its human trafficking of medical personnel. Senator Bob Menendez explained.
This is a set of circumstances where Cuban doctors and other medical personnel are sent to other countries. The country pays Cuba, not the medical professionals. They take the passports away of these medical professionals so that they can't leave, and they are in essence hostage. And it's the equivalent of slave labor from my perspective.
And Dyer explained that the U.S. called out 56 countries who received trafficked medical personnel from Cuba. And Senator Menendez explained that human trafficking is not only happening in other countries.
This year, the government settled a case where more than 100, mostly Spanish-speaking children, were working graveyard shifts at our nation's largest slaughterhouses. That's dangerous work. Some of them were just 13 years old. To me, that's completely outrageous and unacceptable.
To find out how the U.S. ranks different countries around the world in regard to human trafficking and other details, you can find the latest Trafficking in Persons report at state.gov. Jason Perry, NTD News.
California's fentanyl-related deaths are not just an issue in San Francisco. 60 miles south in the county of Santa Clara, officials announced that deaths from the drug had more than doubled by the end of May. NTD's David Lamb has the details.
Here in Santa Clara County, which is the 6th most populous county in California, officials recently announced a spike in fentanyl drug-related deaths, which went from 17 to 41 in the month of May. The county coroner and chief medical examiner said most fentanyl drug deaths in the county involve fentanyl combined with other drugs, including methamphetamine. Officials continue to warn of fentanyl-laced pills circulating in the community, as a portion of victims have unknowingly ingested the drug, thinking they're taking something else. The county has launched campaigns to educate the public on fentanyl and the risks of experimental drug use, with the latest campaign aimed at 14 to 29-year-olds. According to the county's website, fentfacts.org, fentanyl is involved in 4 out of 5 Gen Z drug deaths nationwide.
This is different than drug deaths that we've seen in years past. My daughter, nor the children of the other parents up here, they didn't die of an overdose.
Family members of those that died from fentanyl poisoning have demanded statewide action from elected officials.
They were poisoned. In my daughter's case, she was seeking Percocet. She received a counterfeit pill made to mimic an oxycodone pill, of which she took half before going to bed 2 days before Christmas in 2019.
The opioid is used to treat severe pain, but it's 50 times stronger than heroin, and a small dosage can be fatal. California lawmakers have been divided on how to decrease drug deaths, such as whether to focus on increasing punishment for drug dealers or put efforts into prevention services. From the Foreign Relations Committee on June 20th, U.S. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez introduced the Strengthening Fentanyl Sanctions Act. It would target Chinese PRC pharmaceutical companies, Mexican drug cartels, as well as foreign individuals involved in global drug trade. In Santa Clara, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
The Biden administration wants to replace most combustion engine cars with electric vehicles within the next 10 years. A House committee today examined the proposed emission standards for vehicles. NTD's Arian Pastar has the highlights from the hearing.
The Biden administration continues to release regulation after regulation to dramatically change transportation and mobility for Americans on a timetable that defies reality.
At a Thursday hearing, lawmakers looked at multiple bills which would protect traditional combustion engines like gasoline or diesel. That's after the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, proposed a number of new rules which would set new emission standards for cars and trucks. EPA predicts that through these rules, 2/3 of new light-body vehicles sold in the United States would be electric by 2032.
To reach its goal, the EPA set emission standards that only electric vehicles could achieve. The Choice in Automobile Retail Sales Act, or the CARS Act, prohibits the EPA from moving forward with this proposed rule.
However, the Democrat ranking member opposes the act, saying,
"The Choice in Automobile Retail Sales Act prohibits EPA from finalizing its recently proposed medium-duty and light-duty vehicle standards, blocking the ongoing effort to strengthen tailpipe emission standards for future model years."
Another one of the bills would ease regulations on using cornstarch as renewable energy. Republicans accuse Democrats of focusing too much on battery-powered vehicles, while not taking other forms of energy into account. The U.S. doesn't have the materials needed to produce electric vehicles.
That is money that is going to China. China dominates the supply chains. It's China's technology that is being used in electric vehicles. Since when is the United States of America following China's lead? I've heard from many of my colleagues, I've heard from the Secretary of Energy that we need to be following China's lead. I don't agree.
Democrats support the proposed standards, saying they'll protect the Earth from dangerous emissions which warm the planet. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
It is infamously difficult to cancel a digital subscription. The companies want you to keep on paying that monthly fee. But all this might change after the FTC sued Amazon precisely over its cancellation process. NTD's Sean Marshall explains.
For years, it's been very difficult to cancel a digital subscription.
But the landscape may be changing because the FTC is suing Amazon for making it too difficult to cancel your Prime membership.
Technology companies have made the cost-benefit analysis and have determined that if a user leaves their platform, the likelihood that they're going to come back is very, very low. So they've made the business decision to make it very, very difficult for users to leave their platform.
McLean Donnelly is a professor of user experience design, formerly an executive at Expedia, Shopify, and Shutterstock. He says this lawsuit may set a precedent for tech companies going forward. Donnelly says the techniques that the tech firms use to make it hard to cancel subscriptions are called dark patterns. These patterns take advantage of your psychology to make it difficult for you to reach your goal. One example is making it very hard to find the unsubscribe button.
To cancel something on Amazon, you actually have to go to the accounts and lists thing right below your name. And then below that, there's something called memberships and subscriptions. It's not subscribe and save, which I made the mistake of doing. So if you click on that memberships and subscriptions, you're going to see all the subscriptions that you have.
Brian Chevalier Jordan is the chief marketing officer at National Business Capital. He says it took him around 20 minutes to figure out how to cancel Amazon subscriptions. Chevalier Jordan says the notoriety from the FTC lawsuit may force Amazon to make it easier. Other barriers they throw at you, making the cancellation process very long.
They might ask you to fill out multiple pages to explain why you're leaving. You might have to go through a series of offers. You know, what about a downgrade? What about a discount? What about giving us one more chance? And then in some cases, they actually change the format, the way that you can cancel. So you signed up online, but they require you to call to cancel. And maybe even they require you to call to cancel during their business hours.
Robbie Kelman Baxter is the author of The Membership Economy, a book about these digital subscriptions. She says companies are trying to get a few more months out of their consumers and taking advantage of them. Baxter believes the FTC's lawsuit against Amazon will result in easier cancellation procedures in the industry. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
We reached out to Amazon. The company says the FTC's claims are false on the facts and the law. It says it looks forward to proving its case in court. Coming up, former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro on trial. He's facing a potential 8-year ban from politics. And in France, a parents' association protests against a drag queen storytime session in a public library. Police pressure them to stop the demonstration. Find out the full story here on NTD News.
I can remember being back in medical school where it was almost a depressing conception of the brain. We're born with so many neurons that peak like around 20, and then it's just a downhill decline from there. But today, we are going to debunk this old way of thinking and use a new technology called the functional MRI PET scanner to show that the brain can be rewired to function much better. Caused an almost immediate change, and by better, I mean improved focus, longer attention span, better mood, decreased risk of developing dementia, and an overall better life. So get ready to be surprised and even amazed. This is really exciting information as we explore what is possible, as we talk to thought leaders in the field. I needed to make sure I'm really that guy, okay. See the cutting edge tools they are using to assess the brain and hear from real patients about their dramatic healing process. That's good.
Stay tuned to get 2 rolls of alien tape free. You wouldn't stick your mother-in-law on the wall, but you could with alien tape. It just sticks. Just peel and stick to make anything stay in place quick. Brick, pavers, marble, tile, plastic, even leather. Nothing works better than alien tape. You wouldn't stick your fishbowl on a moving car, but you could with alien tape. The secret is nano-stick technology that grabs and locks on to secure one side of the surface to the other. Alien tape secures in seconds, then twist, pull, and rinse to reuse. Call or go online to get your first roll of alien tape for just $19.99, plus shipping and processing. But to make this deal really stick, we'll give you 2 more rolls absolutely free. You get 3 rolls of alien tape for one low price. Order now.
To order, call 1-800-490-1364 or go to tryalientape.com. So call 1-800-490-1364 or order online at tryalientape.com.
There's always a searching process for beauty. You know it when you see it.
Welcome back. China state media reported that at least 31 people were killed in a gas explosion at a barbecue eatery last night in the northwestern part of the country. The blast happened during peak dining hours, with high school students and retirees said to be among the dead. The restaurant is located on a busy street in Yingchuan, a tourist hub in the region. State media reported that the blast was triggered by a leaking liquefied petroleum gas tank at the restaurant. 7 people still undergoing treatment for burns and cuts from broken glass. Accidents due to gas and chemical blasts are not uncommon in China, despite years of efforts to improve safety. In 2021, a gas explosion at a barbecue restaurant in the northeastern part of the country killed 4 and wounded nearly 50. The latest explosion prompted the authorities to order a safety overhaul across China. Next, an uncertain future. Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, is facing a potential 8-year ban from politics. He's accused of abusing his power when he questioned the nation's electoral system. NTD's Sam Wong brings us the latest.
In Brazil, a trial kicks off today in the capital of Brasilia, and the future of the former Brazilian president is now lying in the hands of the country's federal electoral court.
Today, as you know, my trial starts. Actually, my political trial, and the lowest intention on the part of some. I'm not here attacking the electoral count, but the bases of the trial are something unbelievable.
Bolsonaro summoned a group of foreign ambassadors last July, and he questioned the reliability of Brazil's voting machines in front of them. The meeting was aired on live television, as well as other media platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. The trial will look into whether the act was an abuse of power. If convicted, Bolsonaro will be barred from making any political comeback for the next 8 years. The outcome will be determined by a majority vote from the court's 7 judges. Opponents said that the purpose of the meeting was to fuel skepticism over an election he had lost. The former president denied the accusation, saying that the intention wasn't for electoral purposes. He added that a president has every right to cast doubt on the nation's electoral system. Bolsonaro's lawyers said that the case was, quote, riddled with ideological falsehood. Last year, the former president lost the election to his liberal rival Lula by a narrow margin of 1.6%. To discuss what lies ahead for Bolsonaro, I sat down with Marcos Schottges, the editor-in-chief for the Epic Times Brazil.
His supporters are not as supportive as they once were, and he is not as outspoken as he once was. So I think what lies ahead for him is perhaps going a little bit out of the current trends in politics in Brazil.
Schottges compared Bolsonaro's base with supporters of President Trump.
So there are similarities, and I think the main one is the accusations of the possible weaponization of the justice system. That's something Bolsonaro supporters have been talking about.
Aside from this case, Bolsonaro is currently under several other investigations, and some, if he's found guilty, could put him behind bars. Bolsonaro has faced criticism since the January 8th protests in Brasilia, where his supporters stormed the nation's Congress due to their distrust of Brazil's voting machines. In the face of a polarized electorate, the former president remains steadfast in his claim, insisting that the election was rigged. Sam Wang, NTD News.
American reporter Evan Gershkovich lost his latest appeal at a Russian court today against his pretrial detention on charges of espionage. Gershkovich works for the Wall Street Journal and was arrested in late March while on a reporting trip. Russia's security service said he was trying to obtain military secrets. Both Gershkovich and the Journal deny the charge. A Moscow court ruled last month to keep him in custody until the end of August. Today's court proceedings took place behind closed doors. U.S. Ambassador Lynn Tracy, who was not allowed inside the hearing, told reporters outside that she was extremely disappointed by the decision. Gershkovich is being held at a prison in Moscow, which is notorious for its harsh conditions. Turning to France, drag queen story hours are causing a stir in public libraries. A protest organizer says the police and the mayor asked them to stop the demonstration despite public support. NTD's France correspondent David Vives talked with him.
LGBT associations organized several story hours in France's southwestern city of Bordeaux this June. The associations invited drag queens to read stories to children in 3 public libraries. Outside the libraries, members of a parents' association and the nationalist party Reconquête protested. The LGBT associations are funded by the city and have been invited to lead Pride Month initiatives.
So what we are talking about are associations that have received well over 60,000 euros in 2 years from City Hall. So there's a whole bunch of associations and trans activists and pro-LGBT collectives who are part of this, who carry out actions and who organize. And this is where it bothers us. Readings for children organized by drag queens.
Bonnet says the library director, the police, and even the mayor of Bordeaux went to see the protesters and asked them to stop the demonstration. This is after passers-by who took the protesters' brochures then complained to the library director about the story hour.
We also had a visit from the mayor of Bordeaux's police force, the municipal police, who came on a slanderous denunciation to carry out an identity check for homophobic leafleting. The people themselves took our leaflets and sometimes went up to the libraries to tell the library managers what they think. Some parents didn't even think it was possible, so they went to check it out.
Several associations have tried to organize a drag queen story hour in other French cities. But this has met with many critics, to the point that some of those initiatives have been barred. According to Bonnet, the LGBT associations don't find success with communities in general, but benefit from strong support from politicians to push their agenda.
In any case, ideas don't advance through the masses, they advance through minorities. The people who spread these ideas obviously know this too, and so they don't count on the masses to adopt them. And as it happens, the LGBT lobby here in France is beginning to have a certain power because it's supported by left-wing and far-left political parties.
David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up, a Capitol Hill hearing about protecting pride turned into a discussion on fairness in women's sports, with former college swimmer Riley Gaines front and center. And the race is on for private companies to send the first commercial payload to Mars. 2 California firms say they're ready to take on SpaceX. Stay tuned for more when we come back.
Pretty normal mom life. Everything was pretty good, and it was a very happy life.
And we just had a new baby. And then all of a sudden, within a day or two, she's on life support and fighting for her life.
Then I knew something was pretty wrong. A little less than a week after I came home, I couldn't breathe. That's when we decided to go to the hospital. I was given the diagnosis that I had peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is basically a pregnancy-induced heart failure. They told me my only chance was a heart transplant.
And the American Heart Association helped make that possible. Their research helped save me.
This could not happen without monthly donations from friends like you. Your sustained support helps fund life-saving research that leads to medical breakthroughs, like those that gave Jen a second chance at life. Heart disease is the #1 killer in America, and we urgently need your help to save lives. Go to helpheart.org or call now to become a monthly donor today. Your donation of only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, will make a difference through prevention, early detection, treatments, and cures that help save lives.
I am very thankful for the American Heart Association. I'm grateful for just every day that I get with my children.
Please go to helpheart.org or call now with your donation of just $19 a month. Join our community of monthly donors, and you'll get this limited edition t-shirt you could wear to show you're helping save lives.
One simple act today can save your life or the life of a loved one.
So please, call or go to helpheart.org now to help save lives.
NTD's Capital Report. It's about getting answers, cutting through the fog of politics. It's about your questions and our chances to ask.
What is the net impact of the American Congressman Graves? Thank you for joining us.
We're speaking to those in power to find out what does this mean for the people. We're here so you're in the know.
I don't think that many kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
He would never try it.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way, my kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping. Maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
Welcome back, and now for your sports news, we have NTD's Dave Martin joining us live. Dave, former NCAA champion swimmer Riley Gaines testified on Capitol Hill yesterday as part of the Senate's hearing on LGBTQ rights. What can you tell us about her testimony?
Transgender athlete, that is Leah Thomas, who's formerly known as Will Thomas, whose ranking in the NCAA jumped from 462nd as a male to 1st as a female. But I think the most moving part about her testimony was when she described having to share the same locker room with him. So let's go ahead and play that clip now if we can.
Let me be clear about this. We were not forewarned we would be sharing a locker room. No one asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent. And I'll set the scene. A swimming locker room is not a place of modesty. You're undressing, you're fully exposed, and we were forced to take off our swimsuit in front of a man who was doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, Tiff, I'll also mention that later on, she referred to that scene again, and she said that when Thomas came into the locker room, she went out to find an official to say, you know, what is with the deal of a man coming into our locker room? And it was a man, and she said he casually just kind of told her, well, we got around that by making all of these locker rooms unisex. And so some of the girls actually ended up changing in a janitor's closet.
And Dave, in terms of this hearing, did this hearing discuss fairness in sports and why we have separate men's and women's competitions?
Yeah, there was actually another lively exchange when Senator John Kennedy was asking one of the other witnesses about this. This is a Kelly Robinson, who's president of the Human Rights Campaign. She had a different opinion. Riley Gaines ends up joining in this discussion, so let's play that clip now too.
How many female members of the NBA do you see?
Well, I can say that, you know, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis. Right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female?
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women.
Now, Tiff, I'd like to point out that in fairness to Ms. Robinson, I don't think she was talking about professional men's tennis players thinking that. But the average male fan, of course, is not going to beat Serena Williams. But Gaines' testimony there is true, though, what she said. And the Williams sisters, I mean, they have dominated women's tennis. 30 Grand Slam titles between them in singles and plenty more even in doubles.
And Dave, moving on to basketball now, the NBA draft is tonight. What can we expect to see?
Well, I think the only certainty at this point is that the San Antonio Spurs are going to select this unknown French teenager named Victor Wembanyama. He's unknown because he didn't play college in the U.S. He's only 19 years old, but he led the French league last year in points, rebounds, and block shots. His height is listed anywhere from 7'2" to 7'5". He weighs approximately 240 pounds. But unlike tall players, I mean, this is tall even for the NBA, this guy can move. He plays on the perimeter too. He's a good three-point shooter. He can drive to the basket. Some have called him the best prospect since LeBron James. Now, I got to say, not every draft has this high of a prospect, but for the Spurs, this is the third time a charm for them. 1987, they drafted David Robinson first overall. He went to the Hall of Fame. 10 years later, they got Tim Duncan, another Hall of Famer. So the Spurs franchise has been very fortunate here.
Lots to look out for here, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
For over half a century, missions to Mars have been funded and operated mostly by state-backed aerospace agencies of different countries. But now the race is on for private companies to deliver the first commercial payload to the Red Planet. NTD's David Zhang spoke with a Southern California space company that's among those who want to take on SpaceX.
California-based Impulse Space and Relativity Space jointly announced at the 2023 Humans to Mars Summit that the timeline trajectory for their private Mars mission has changed. They're now expecting to launch sometime in 2026. If successful, they will still beat out SpaceX in the race for private companies to send interplanetary missions to Mars.
We settled on the Mars mission. We could have gone to the moon, and certainly there are others doing that, but the Mars one is somewhat unique. Secondly, we aren't reinventing the wheel in the sense that this mission is very much akin to what was done by NASA for the InSight mission.
According to Impulse Space website, the plan is for the company's capsule and Mars lander to be carried by Relativity Space 3D printed Terran R rocket.
Flying this 3D printed rocket is going to be a huge milestone for Relativity. I'm quite convinced this is the biggest 3D printed object really ever flown in aerospace.
After traveling through space for over half a year, the cruise vehicle will inject the entry capsule into the Mars orbit. The lander will then perform a propulsive landing using purpose-built engines developed in-house at Impulse Space. This would complete the first commercial payload delivery to the surface of Mars. Both companies emphasize that the mission is just to deliver commercial payloads, not humans. As to the burning question on everybody's mind, when we'll be able to put humans on Mars?
There's a fair amount of infrastructure and study that needs to be done before humans go to Mars. And we are going to enable that, but that says we're going to be doing several missions in every window, 26, 28, 31 roughly. So it may take beyond that to get humans to Mars.
In the commercial competition going to Mars, SpaceX, Boeing, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic have all stated or expressed interest in leading expeditions to the fourth planet in our solar system. Meanwhile, NASA and the China National Space Administration are in a tacit race to put humans on Mars.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.